RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RevOpsAF, the podcast. I am your co-host, Matthew Volm, and on RevOpsAF podcast, we talk to people who are RevOpsAF about things that are RevOps AF. And today I am with Stephen Messer, who is a co-founder of Collective I. We're going to be talking all about AI and agents and how this is essentially ushering in a new era for revenue operations. But Stephen, thank you for joining, my friend. Why don't you tell us a little bit first about yourself, your background, and Collective I, because I think that'll set a good stage for people on why you are incredibly qualified to be talking to us about this topic today.
Well, thanks for having me here, and I'm really excited to talk to you and your community. Maybe you have one of the best communities out there, and one that's important to learn these changing world and what it means for them in their career. So I'm excited to spend some time with you. And I've had a bit of experience in disruptive technologies. My co-founders and I started a company called Linkshare. At the dawn of the internet. It is the world's largest affiliate marketing company. We ended up selling that to Rakuten for about $500 million. When we did that, most people looked at us and said, I don't understand affiliate marketing at all. That's not how the world works. You buy advertising, you get audiences. Why would anyone want to pay purely based on performance? Here we are now, 20 years later. Can you imagine buying a Super Bowl ad and just not caring about the performance? It's a whole different world. We helped start a company called Spire, which is a satellite company. We did little cube satellites. We call our satellites lemurs. Everyone said those are toys. Real satellites are these minibus version size things that get launched by big expensive rockets and blow up all the time. But that's the only way to really do things. And here we are. It's a New York Stock Exchange traded company doing really well. Small satellites seem to be a big deal. If you may have heard of this other company called Starlink, which is doing these cube satellites. Well, these little toys have transformed things. And so then we get to the internet. About 10 years ago, we really started getting into what were called neural nets. Now it's called deep learning or foundation models. We really started right around the time of OpenAI and Mine, the two of the major players. And our major focus was on really building what's called an economic foundation model, which is an AI that studies how the world does business. We do that so that we can help organizations like the people you work with or follow your podcast. They're trying to figure out how to grow revenue. They're trying to figure out how to be more efficient and operate. And to do that, you have to have a brain that understands what's actually happening in the world. Then you can do things with that brain, agents and other types of things. But you must have that brain. Our first customers came to us and we came to them with a value proposition and said, look, if you join, you contribute your data and it educates our neural net. And as our neural net gets smarter, you get better results. And everyone said nobody would ever do that. Why would anyone share their data? And we're big believers in first principles. We've had a few $1 billion of exits. So we said, hey, how about this? Would your CFO ever extend credit to a customer based solely on how they paid you? I don't think that CFO would be the CFO very long if they didn't use a credit bureau. That would be insane. So there are certain big business problems that people try to solve by using their own data. And that doesn't work, right? We've watched Einstein, which I'm sure he's rolling over in his brain, because machine learning is what happens when you use your own data. You have to use a small data set. And you may think, oh, I'm a big company. Trust me, you're a small data set. OpenAI is running out of words. They've scraped everything from the internet to get to intelligence. If you are using your own data solely and you're buying a piece of software that claims it as AI, but is essentially only using your own data, you are talking about worm level intelligence. I would not recommend building agents on worm level intelligence. That is a formula for real fast problems really going bad. So what we're seeing now is this evolving world of a new architecture rising up and changing a lot of the ways that sort of old CRM-first mentality is really how people have built things. That's going away. And that's what's exciting about this timeline of this age of intelligence.
Yeah, it certainly feels like we're living through one of those moments where we'll be able to look back, and my kids right now are 6 and 8. I'll be able to look back and tell them about this time. I imagine being like, I remember the day when we used to have to write written words for a prompt and get output. It's like me telling him now about what a VCR and a VHS player is. You brought this up. It's ushering in this new era, this new wave. So let's first talk about, before we get into use cases and all this other stuff, because I'm sure you got a lot of
Yeah.
recommendations there. Let's talk about how people should be thinking about AI. How should people even be thinking about AI as it relates to them as revenue operators today? Let's start there.
This is going to be hard for your base to get their arms around, but there is no stack when it comes to AI. That goes away, it eviscerates all stack. Why? Because what you have right now are segmented sets of data and no intelligence. Each one of those sets of data are trying to build intelligence off their limited view of data. So everyone is like, to the man with the hammer, the world looks like a nail. Every one of your individual tools is trying to build some kind of ML, call it AI, something. And they're all trying to do it on this very thin data set. And each one sees only a piece of what's happening. So if I were to take an analogy of a self-driving car, imagine if there was a sensor on the front, the sides of the car, the back, etc., but each one ran independent of all the others. You would not want to be in that car
Yeah.
because it would start making decisions based on just its sensor. What happens when you have intelligence is you're trying to actually eliminate the segmenting of data. Let's take Collective Eye, for example. When our customers install us, they're hooking into things like email, calendar, phone, video conference. We're sucking all that data in, but it's a collective intelligence. It's learning from everybody in the network without sharing anything. You do this all the time every time you use Google Maps or you're just searching on Google. You're getting no one is sharing their data to you, but you're getting better insights every time you do it. But what's happening is when you suck in all that data to a central node, all of a sudden all these separate tools seem weird. For example, our product gives free unlimited contacts. You don't need to go buy Zoom. Why?
Yeah.
Because I have to follow, Matt, I have to follow everyone like you across all of their business. That means I keep up to date all your contact information, your title changes. I have to build a graph, everyone you interact with across my whole network. Why? Well, I need to know how you make business decisions based on relationships. That's just another vector in making predictions of what's going to happen in your world. Right? I have to know when your deals are going to close. I have to know who's involved in the transaction. I have to know about people involved in your transaction, even if they're not at your company, like a board member or a partner, right? I need to be able to see this view of what's going on because a self-driving car needs as much great information, but all the sensors are coming to one central node to form an understanding of what's going on. And just like all self-driving cars, like Teslas or Waymo, all of the data from all the cars are helping inform intelligence. This is why the stack changes so much. The second reason it changes is in neural net land, in AI land, there is no workflow anymore. Anyone who's done a chat GPT example knows there's no step-by-step to building a presentation. You discuss how many slides you want, you discuss the theme, you discuss what you want, and then it comes out. Then you just talk to it about making edits. So the whole older stack, which is really this step-by-step guide that's really been designed over years to make sure that you can take your worst person and make them average. And that's why we build workflows. They're meant to protect against people going off the rails. The problem is they're very rigid. The data then is not real. I'm creating a data set that tells an AI a very different picture of what's actually happening. I'm telling them always this data set happens. Always
Mm-hmm.
these things go this certain way. Well, the AI can't optimize that. So you end up in this place where you're constantly getting this negative feedback loop. And I'll give an example. If most of my employees were 55-year-old white men, what do you think the AI is going to recommend my next employee will be? A 55-year-old white man,
Yeah.
right?
Not
It's not that hard to
22-year-old
figure out.
female. Yeah.
So no one who really could do the job will get the job because it's looking at such small amount of data and it's repetitive. And because you've created these fixed processes, you're actually not helping it learn anything. So it's a very different world. In fact, you want variety in neural nets, partly why you have a big network, but it's also your goal in AI land is optimization, which is very different than the old stack, right? The old stack was designed to hit a number. I would argue the hardest thing in the world to do is to get the Goldilocks problem perfect, which is not too much, not too little. And
Hmm.
it's probably not a very customer friendly way of doing things because you're basically focusing on your need above your customer's need by trying to figure out who can I push out or who can I pull forward. These are all weird concepts that are not really client centric. AI is always about optimization. It's always optimizing to the outcome, which means your customer. So these are all frame changes that seem really weird, but that's why it's so disruptive.
Yeah. All right. So I hear all that and I'm like, okay, well, then what? Do I just rip out all the shit I've got? Like you said, it's not something I just layer on top of what I have. So how should people be thinking about that? Because like you said, they have been operating, systematizing things in a certain way due to those limitations that you have. And so even if you get past that way of thinking, right? It's like you've still got all this data, all this other
Legacy.
stuff from the past.
You have
You
all
still
this
got all
legacy.
the, you
What do you
got the
do?
CRM, you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
all this other stuff, right? So yeah, what do you do? You're like, all right, fuck it, just rip it out, start over. I've now got nothing.
Yeah, no, look, you're not wrong. If I look at the RevOps community, they look like the old Soviet generals where they all have like a whole wall of
Yeah.
medals. It's like, I've survived this implementation, this
Yeah.
SI group. You have these sort of medals of how you've operated. People equate hard work with good. We call it the IKEA bias. If I put all this work in to making my stack work, it must be good. That was probably fine when the sales software as a service world sort of worked the way it did. In intelligence, it's not sort of how this stuff works. I'll give you an example. When we do transformations, we don't tell people to rip stuff out. We say, look, do me a favor, connect all your systems and it takes less than 2 weeks for me to go live. And that means end to end. Then let's look at your stack and say, what do you need? So if
Mhm.
I'm able to give you better contacts than a Seamless or a Zoom, do you need to buy credits? Usually what ends up happening is they'll say no. And then you say, okay, we do a relationship graph, except in ours, it's built on a professional network, not a social network. LinkedIn's a social network. So the problem is you get a lot of people following, but there's no relationship there. How do I do that? Well, in our world, in a professional network, which is what we do, we not just graph relationships, but we build real strength into it. How long have you known each other? What are the roles? Is there company parity, title parity? We go through all this stuff, but you get the ability to see who's real. Why? Well, relationships are the lubricant that get deals done. So you get that. Now we look and say, okay, compare ours to a LinkedIn Navigator. Does that give you that? And usually they'll say, my God, it's totally different. And you're like, okay, great. If you want it, great. So what happens is they start removing pieces of the stack. And what they start to find is the more they remove, the more flexible their infrastructure gets. The more they're starting to adjust daily to what's going on. For example, we do things like daily forecasting and daily odds. There's no people involved. Take a moment, imagine a forecasting process with no people.
I've
To a
never seen
RevOps
one.
person,
What do you do
well,
with
to a
all the
RevOps,
time then? What do you do? You got your forecasting calls, right? I've got to grill all my sales reps on every
this is
little
the
thing.
logic,
I've got
right?
to
They're
go
like, how?
hunting. Yeah.
How could you have it? But if I asked you this question, if you were in a car with four of your best friends and your phone that has Google Maps, which would give you a better estimated arrival? Asking your four friends what time they think you'll arrive, polling them, which is forecasting. Maybe your four friends, let's call them, are the best Uber drivers out there. So they've been on every road for the last year. Do you think they're better than Google Maps at predicting the estimated arrival?
My friends are pretty dumb.
I doubt that. You are one of the smartest guys I know, which is why I'm here. This is not the case. What it is they're so used to this 30-year-old approach of doing things. So we come in and show them within a month, they're starting to notice our forecasts are more accurate. Everything's more accurate. Then they start asking, okay, why are we only have 30% productivity? There's a point in this AI transformation where people stop defending the stack and start figuring out how the next gen operates because it's so much better. It's so much easier. Everything's always integrated. So you move one piece, you see tomorrow your impact of it. This idea that you could have an update every day in forecasting is crazy. People spend all of Friday predicting what they think the next week will be, even though polling people, which is the forecasting process, hasn't worked since Dewey was supposed to be Truman. Like we
Hmm.
haven't relied on polling for anything, but in sales, that is what it is. And they know it. Look, the reality is they spend all day Friday doing this forecast meeting. Is there any other department in the entire org that takes that number and does anything?
Yeah. No.
Does HR figure out how many you need to hire? No. Does manufacturing say, okay, let's figure out how many widgets we need to build? No. Right? I mean, nobody listens to them. And this is partly what's causing, I think, for RevOps, a lack of upward mobility. And AI offers them a way to actually be the most important person in the org.
Hmm.
Because if you go from the old stack CRM, old school mentality, and you start becoming the AI driver of the business, you change the front of the stack to be dynamic, the rest of the back office becomes dynamic, and you're leading it. This is a different charge. This is what happened with marketing. My first company, Linkshare, started with the marketing groups. They went from buying ads 6 months in advance, hoping that the product they were going to launch then would actually have anything to do with the market, to people
Hmm.
who are adjusting keywords 3 times an hour to increment and get optimized things. Well, guess what happened to those CMOs that used to be these brand-based CMOs who were not considered ever in the path to be CEO? There are more marketers now that are CEOs in almost any other area. They went from having no growth mobility to being the main growth driver. We think sales is about ready to hit that same inflection point, but it's all about being data driven. And that is
Hmm.
not what you have with CRM.
Yeah. And you just mentioned a good thing, right? Marketing obviously did not go away in that example. It
It
evolved.
grew.
And that's exactly what's happening here. And so your point there was interesting because I got thinking you kind of work backwards, right? Instead of thinking that AI is going to be this thing that you add on top to help you become more efficient or effective, it's kind of the opposite. You start with it and then work backwards to pull out or replace
Yeah,
those things that are not helping you be efficient or effective anymore so that you can actually do things that will produce better results and improve that productivity. I don't know, is that the right way to kind
that's
of frame it?
exactly it. The CRM first mindset has always been I'll just keep layering things on my stack because each thing does something unique. And the intelligence revolution that's happening now is the exact opposite. It goes from the other way around, right? Is ChatGPT a poetry writer? Yeah. Is it a presentation maker? Yeah. Is it a translator? Yeah. In other words, it's not like SaaS where you're buying one stack per thing. And
Hmm.
in fact, what you're trying to do is have flexibility. The reason why you love ChatGPT so much is you can literally go from working on poetry to actually have it create the music for that poetry to then create a music video for it. Like the flexibility that you have to leverage an intelligent application is so different because it unleashes creativity. But if you've got a stack that limits you, that's not built on an agentic architecture like we are. What you're trying to do is layer this stuff. And what you end up having to do is to end up layering your agents are going to be based off of these silos of data, and they're all going to fail. The reason why Einstein and Watson and all these machine learning stuff that are all like single use things have failed are because they literally see this one teeny world. So until you rip that out, you're stuck with a brain that's so simple minded that you're going to be like, it doesn't work, but it's going to work for other people because they're removing this limitation, this inflexible architecture. It's
Yeah.
not AI. So you're right, though. You start, we're not telling people gut it because people, that's like, I mean, can you imagine telling that same Russian general, let's get rid of all these? They're like, no, we have to have all these things. But if you start getting in there, your mindset starts changing. You start getting frustrated by those old technologies. They
Yeah.
just don't work the way you need it to work, right? If you go in now and try to create a presentation using PowerPoint versus using one of these intelligent bots, you just want to kill yourself because it takes so long and you're doing really basic stuff compared to the stuff that you were creating in a lot of these other applications. Can you imagine a coder not using cursor now?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you had an engineer not using cursor, let me tell you something. You are at the bottom of the barrel. If they are not using cursor, they are probably not engineers, right? It just changes the way you operate. But I'll tell you this, I see in the RevOps community a lot of people taking the approach. Well, my existing provider has told me they have AI,
Oh, yeah.
so it's going to be good enough. Yeah, that's not when we talk about AI, we're talking about deep learning. That is not what they're seeing. They would be telling you, you must contribute your data. It's the only way deep learning works.
Yeah.
So you have to do it. They're all taking these little safe steps because it feels so different when there's disruptive technologies of this magnitude. I have these step is like a step to death. Like you will blow up because you're just not getting the logic of this. I always tell our customers, I don't care if it's with us or with someone else, but find someone that you think is at the cutting and the bleeding edge and just ask them to explain it to you over and over again. I find too often people are trying to make decisions on whether this will work for them without any experience. It's like someone asking me, what's it like to live on
Yeah.
Mars? Honestly, I can make something up, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I've watched Total Recall. That's about all I know about living on Mars.
Yeah.
But if I went there for 2 weeks, I'd probably come back with some real understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think RevOps is at real risk. If they don't help their organization make the transformation, if their only goal is building stacks, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
job doesn't exist in the same way a pure hand coded engineer writing code doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't existed for 2 years now.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned this before, but if you think about revenue operations, at least right now and historically, they sit at the intersection of people, process, and technology that ultimately drives those revenue outcomes for a business, right? If you look at the tooling, all the things that have been there, the people, marketing, sales to CS, the process, they know where the bodies are buried, they know the stuff that works, they know all those little intricacies, right? And so they're really well positioned. I think you said this before. They're really well positioned to be that strategic asset that ushers in this new way of thinking. And I think you gave some really good examples of how a revenue operator can do that. But if we as ops folks now, if we frame this differently, like we talked about before, this is not an incremental thing on top of your stack. This is a totally new way of doing things. So now you're there, right? What are some ways people can get started? Whether it's one, two, or three things, how can a revenue operator be like, okay, I'm not going to do the things Steven just mentioned where it's take an existing provider who says they have AI or just start layering some stuff on top. What are the best ways that ops folks can get started with AI in the right way?
It's funny, Matt. What I love when I'm talking to people who are at the cutting edge, and you do this well for your audience, what I love so much is that you said it with it when the first time I said it, which is what happens if we get rid of that forecast Friday? You're like, what do we do with the time back? We always start with our customers by saying, look, 20 to 30% productivity is the lowest productivity of any part of the organization. When you layer on 35% churn every year, we know there's a problem because enterprise reps have had $1 million quota for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Despite inflation, despite all these
Yeah.
tools, quotas have not gone up. That is not a sign of success. So, what do we talk about almost always with them? Let us remove barriers to work, activity capture. There should be no human being who is manually entering anything into a CRM. Why? It is not verifiable facts. We need verifiable facts. We don't want people manipulating system. Let an AI do that. We do that at Collective Eye, but let somebody who's got a real AI do all the activity capture. That means capturing missing buyers. That means capturing missing sellers. That means keeping all that information up to date. All of that matters because if you can't do that, there's nothing to do. The second thing is remove things where you have to do coordination. Most organizations I know, even in fast transactions, there's a minimum of two or three people involved in a deal, whether it be a lawyer sending a contract out, whether it be security person filling out some security docs, whether it be a manager reviewing a rep. Even in small deals, there's so many people. As you get more complicated in the business, that number goes up. The overhead of trying to keep aligned is insane. I'll give an example. We have something called the virtual deal room. It is completely complementary to every individual user. Why? Because SaaS means that people are picking who gets a license and who doesn't. In a network like ours, we want everybody who's touching that deal to be captured because we want the activity data. So we give it away at no cost. Bring them all together. Bringing people together, free time back. Daily forecasting, daily review of every opportunity. These are things that you can go within a week or two from having 20% productivity to having 80% productivity. And then you're right. People start asking, what do I do next? And that's what intelligent applications like Collective Eye are waiting for. When you can start to say, now that I can spend time with my customer, what can I do? And I will tell you, deep learning companies like Collective Eye are focused on making average to mediocre people super intelligent, not so-so, but super intelligent. If I'm on a call with a customer and they say, I'm having trouble justifying this expense, I need an AI that can say, can you produce me an ROI for this particular company with the problems they've mentioned to me, et cetera? And we will literally produce it to you on the fly.
Hmm.
So it's not just saying, how do I get rid of the things that are preventing me from doing my job? It's much more than that. Once they have the time to start realizing I can now do even more, this is where you start to destroy non-AI businesses. AI first companies just crush everyone else.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but my to-do list never gets shorter, right? There's always more to do. There's always more business to generate. There's more stuff, right? So if you start to eliminate those, if you outsource those to technology and let AI do that stuff for you, then you can get back to the human to human sort of stuff that is really important and that ultimately drives businesses forward. It's how we get deals done. It's how money gets made. It allows enterprise reps to take their quota up from 1 million to 2 million, right? I mean, probably closer to where it should be now because of the improved productivity. So, what are some of the technologies or tools, maybe some of your favorites out there? I know Collective Eye is going to be at the top of the list, but I always like to ask, especially like AI companies, how are AI companies using AI? So, what are some of the ways that you guys are using that today?
Yeah, I mean, look, you mentioned Collective Eye, but we also have a free version, just so you know, for individuals. Your organization is welcome to go to intelligence.com. You'll get a free version where you can see relationship mapping and contacts, and you can connect your own individual CRM before you get to company. I highly recommend it. It's a great way to start to get your legs about how does this stuff work, because I think that goes a long way in changing how you operate. I mentioned in your organization, go to the engineering departments that are using Cursor. They're 2 years ahead of where your sales group are. They used to have very workflow oriented methodologies. I would try to go to that group because they're probably further ahead in this agent based world than any of the other parts of the organization. And they can start to explain to you how Cursor works and why it's so valuable. And it's an analogy. And while it's not perfect for that, I would recommend that. We use it in all of our marketing. Every time we roll out a product, we do prototypes completely AI driven. That's everything from the UI, and we bring it to customers and ask them to test it out. I highly recommend start using agents that you can talk to. Most of the people that I know here are still trying to write things. We use HeyGen for all of our advertising. We think it's easy. We love it. We don't hire spokesmen anymore. There's a lot of different things. I would also recommend that they start to get involved in a lot of communities. Now, I sit on a lot of boards and a lot of investors ask me, and one of the things I always tell people when they're talking about diversity of boards is I always ask, do you have an entrepreneur on that board? Because you'd be amazed at how old school a lot of the board members are, and they have no one talking about what disruptive things they need to pay attention to. If you don't have a board member who's your champion, I highly recommend joining one of the events we do every week. It's free. It's a podcast called CIForecast.com. We have the world's most well-known people from Jan LeCun, one of the godfathers of AI, to Mark Pincus, who is the founder of Zynga. It's 90 minutes where you get to ask them, how are they thinking about this stuff? They're not using our products. I mean, a lot of them are customers, but there are people there. But these are some of the most well-known people in the world. The reason why we want you there is if you hear how they're talking, how they're thinking, you're probably not getting that inside your work. So it starts you down a path of a way of thinking that's different. Now, can I share one last thing? This transformation happened for when they started using the internet. This transformation happened when they started going to mobile. It's just faster and bigger, and it's happening at a rate that is mind-boggling. I don't think any other company has created $304 billion in value after 2 years of launching their product like ChatGPT did. So that's not a fly in the pan. That's happening
Hmm.
because usages are going through the roof. Now, if you had asked CIOs 6 months ago, they would have said adoption inside their orgs are very low because they weren't buying the tools. All their users were. Individuals in their
Yeah.
companies were individually going out and buying it around the CIO because the CIO thought it wasn't happening 6 months ago. As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that I think is really, I hope I gave you some examples of tools to use. I tried to use analogies in different industries because these are the places where you're seeing rapid adoption, and sales should be at the forefront. They
And
need to
that's
get there.
where what you mentioned is important because you learn a lot by looking outside of your current world, outside of your current space. And I think you gave some really great examples for any revenue operator who's working within a software technology company today. You obviously have an engineering team, you have engineering leaders. Go and ask them about Cursor, about other ways that they're leveraging and adopting AI and technology. Because at the end of the day, they're doing it to make them more efficient in producing a product that's delivered to users. You, as a revenue operator, RevOps is your product, right? Like you are leveraging people, process, and technology to deliver a product to your stakeholders and your users as well. So why wouldn't you want to do that as efficiently and effectively as possible? And a lot of times when you're at the cutting edge of these things, you're going to learn from people or teams outside of your space, right? And like you said, engineering team, probably a couple of years ahead of you, go there and see what you can learn and apply to your current world today.
One thing that might be a
Yeah.
little bit different,
Yeah.
AI-driven companies, our product is based off of the community. The more people who join, the better it gets. Just like Google Maps, AI-first companies, we give away our product. It's complimentary for every individual user. So it's not even a budget thing. If they had 10,000 sellers, they could get 10,000 complimentary licenses without ever paying us a penny and get all the benefits that we talked about. It's a mindset shift. And you're 100% right. When you talk to the engineers, 2 years ago, they were like, this thing's not going to take our jobs. Now they realize it's definitively not taking their jobs because they're doing so much more.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff you're 100% right is they've just got to get their hands on these tools and start using it. And we've made it possible for them to do it without budget.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I do have one more non-RevOps, non-AI related question for you before I let you go. And I didn't prep you for this or tell you that I was going to ask you this question. So looking for your off the cuff answer here. With RevOps Co-op, we host an annual RevOps conference. It's called RevOpsAF. Last year it was in San Diego. This year it's in May in New Orleans. And we're going to have 300 to 350 operators from kind of all over joining us. It'll happen over the course of a couple of days. And so I want you to imagine that you are delivering the opening keynote for RevOps AF, and we announce your name. Everyone in the crowd, 350 people, right? They all stand up. They're all cheering. Yeah, Steven, so excited to see you. And so you're walking on stage. You're entering stage left. What would be your walk-up song that you would play as you came up on stage to deliver the opening keynote at RevOps AF 2025?
Well, look, call it for my bar mitzvah days, but it might be We Are Family, which is, I believe we're a community of people that make each other successful. We've built
Yeah,
our whole business off of this idea of collective intelligence. We succeed when we all work together. And we have not succeeded as an industry by trying to go it alone in each one of our own little industries. The reason why people love your community as much as I do is because for the first time, they find a place where they can actually find success by working together. And I think we just embody that in a product is this idea that every company that joins makes everybody better. You loved it with Google, you loved it with Waze. We are trying to do it for the revenue community.
yeah. That's awesome. And now I'm definitely going to have that song stuck in my head for the rest of the day. So thank you for that, Steven. We are family. All right. All right, my friend. Well, that is all I got from you. From AI to kind of the way of thinking to We Are Family and taking a community-driven approach to podcasts or products. Steven, thank you very much for being on the show, my friend. I'll let you run.
Matt, thank you for having me here. Thank you for letting me talk to your amazing audience. And please, let's find more ways to do things together. I have been a huge fan and will continue to be a huge fan of everything you do.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOps safe, y'all.